The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Festivals throughout Ontario had to make the call about whether to open this summer well before the warm weather arrived. Tonight we'll find out why canceling events such as the iconic CNE could have truly lasting implications. Then, meet the notorious hacker activist Commander X. He explains the world of Anonymous and life on the run behind a Guy Fawkes mask. It's Tuesday, May 25th, and that's all tonight on The Agenda. Last week, Ontario laid out a path for reopening, but for myriad festivals and events that usually happen in this province, it was already too late. For some perspective on that, let's hear from three guests, and as is our custom, we'll introduce them from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting with, in Eden Mills, Ontario, just outside Guelph, David Radley. He's president of the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. At Exhibition Place on the waterfront of Ontario's capital city, Daryl Brown, executive director of the Canadian National Exhibition. And in the downtown core, Susie Hota, medical director of infection prevention and control and an infectious diseases specialist at the University Health Network. And Susie, it's great to have you on the program again, and to our other two guests, first time for you, and we're happy to welcome you. Daryl, let's start with you. Whose decision was it to cancel your festival?
It was the City of Toronto's.
And what did you think about the call?
Of course. Well, it's not that it was unexpected. We work very closely with the Toronto Board of Health every year for our event. So we were proceeding with our plans with some trepidation that there might be word that this would happen. And of course it did.
And do you, well, I guess I'm allowed to ask you this. You don't have to answer it, but I certainly can ask it. Do you agree with the decision?
Well, let's put it this way. We had planned for multiple scenarios, including having an indoor-outdoor typical CNE or constructing various, let's say, population-limited, outdoor-only types of events. We believe as the year progresses, there's going to be opportunity to have large events, but we also fully understand and appreciate what the city had to do. And I guess the other side of this is the further we go into planning, we spend massive amounts of money in front of the event, and if it doesn't happen, it just contributes more to our financial crisis.
Understood. David, how about to you? Who made the decision to cancel your festival this year?
We have a board of directors of 7 people who discussed it, listened to the medical experts, and we finally decided that we didn't see it happening. And like Darryl, if you start planning something like this and it doesn't go ahead, there's a lot of money goes to waste. So we very early on decided that with the way things were going, it didn't seem like we'd be able to have our normal 22,000 people altogether, so we decided to go virtual again this year.
And I'm sure you don't like the decision, but at the end of the day, did you agree with it?
Oh yeah, I think so. You keep hearing that it's going to go, we're going to get better, but yes, I think it's the right decision, much as I hate it for our competitors and patrons. I think the board is unanimous, and we decided that we just need to concentrate on doing a virtual this year and go big for next year.
Well, Twitter, as we know, is a font of all wisdom, and there's nothing but goods to know, he said with his tongue firmly implanted in his cheek. Having said that, somebody on Twitter did make this comment when they heard about the CNE being canceled this year. Here's what they tweeted. I try to be positive, but this just makes the spotlight on us as the most, quote, locked down city in North America even more embarrassing. New York City is opening up sans Broadway to 100% capacity by Canada Day, celebrations the city preemptively canceled weeks ago. Susie, let me get your expertise on this. Was there, in your judgment, no way at all to hold even a scaled down version of what are, after all, outdoor events?
I mean, I do think that sadly, the way that things have transpired over the last several months, it became more and more clear that we just weren't going to be in a position to have large mass gatherings into this early part of the summer and probably into the middle of the summer. This third wave of COVID-19 in Ontario has really been the worst that we've experienced so far. And, our vaccination kind of lagged behind some other areas, like parts of the US, where they were able to kind of go fast and furious and cover a lot of the population with first doses and even second doses quite rapidly. So, outdoor gatherings are safer. We know that. We encourage outdoor activities, but these are mass gatherings. They're huge, and they attract people from all over the world. So it's a different matter altogether.
So, from an infectious diseases point of view, there was really, in your judgment, no way, even with, put all the caveats on there you want, scaled down numbers, no indoor events, there really was no way to do it safely?
Not with the way that we saw this wave transpire. I mean, we're still recovering from the third wave, and cases are coming down, but slowly. And we're also seeing different variants emerge through different parts of the world and trying to get a handle of that here in Ontario. So, I think we're just not quite there yet. And, like some of my other colleagues here on the show have said, let's just try to get through this safely this year and hope to plan for a greater event next year.
Let's just do a little background here and give our viewers and listeners a sense of what's at stake. Daryl, the Canadian National Exhibition goes back to 1879, for goodness sakes. How has it evolved over the years? Give us some of that background.
Well, we've always focused on a number of different activities straight up from 1879 onward. There's an agricultural section. We focus on industry and manufacturing, where a lot of innovation has been presented over the years, and there's also a general community benefit and arts sector. Many people may not realize that we had an art gallery from 1902 onward and actually contributed 340 artworks to the AGO in the mid-60s. So we were a strong supporter of the arts, and even had a government section that was featured in the fair for many, many years. So there was opportunity for the government to parlay its message over time. If you put it in perspective, even in 1920, when our population was a little bit under 9 million, 1.5 million people attended the fair. We've had over 250 million people attend in its history, and we even outdrew the Pan Am Games in 2015. So it's still a relevant event that evolves year to year and is still of great interest to the community, both in the GTA and outside of the GTA.
And of course, there's the Midway with all those great rides, and there's the concerts. You bring in artists every year to perform at the bandshell, and I know the Bulova Watchtower, the Bulova Clock Tower isn't there anymore, but it feels like it's a part of everybody's childhood if you grew up, in the province of Ontario, particularly if you grew up in the Toronto area. And I wonder if you could just talk for a second about the emotional loss, the traditional loss, all of that kind of aesthetic that Ontario will not experience this summer because of this.
Well, just to give an indication, we've had 14,000 people sign a petition over the last week and a half. It's savethecne.ca is the website that was put out by Mike Layton, but that gives an idea of the sentiment that's out there. The thing is, people work at the CNE when they're young. We hire about 5,000 young people every year, and so they take that with them. And there's a tradition of going with your family, with your grandparents, parents. When we look at the dichotomy of who attends, we cover the range in terms of income distribution. It's almost even for household income under $25,000 to people who are earning $100,000 to $200,000 a year, and we also cover all age groups almost equally in terms of distribution. So there's massive support for the event, and people just echo that this is not something they want to see lost.
Now, David, let's do the same thing for the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games, which don't go back quite as far as the CNE, but they go back almost 8 decades, which is a long time. How has that evolved over the years?
Well, for those who don't know, Fergus is a pretty small town on the banks of the Grand River, just northeast of Guelph, and it was settled by Scottish immigrants. So the descendants of those Scottish immigrants, just after the Second World War, 1946, decided they should have some sort of celebration of their Scottish heritage. So they started the Fergus Highland Games, which has evolved to the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. So it's been running continuously since 1946. It features most of the things you expect to see in a normal Scottish festival, heavy events, pipes and drums, clans, and Highland dancing, along with a bunch of other things. It's been very successful, had its ups and downs through the years, but it's evolved to the point where it's become internationally known. We get an international patronage. We normally attract nothing like the CNE, but we normally attract around 22,000 people with our visitors and competitors each year. It is well known in the Scottish diaspora throughout the world now, and we enjoy putting it on with roughly 200 volunteers. It's fully volunteer based, and we're one of about 10 Scottish festivals in Ontario, and probably one of or the biggest of those.
And what kind of community feedback have you received so far to the fact that it's not going to happen this summer?
Well, obviously a lot of disappointment. I think most people, we get those that say we should go ahead, but most people understand. We get about 350 camping groups in every year. They obviously all look forward to it. The competitions for the pipes and drums and the heavies and the heritage and the Highland dance, obviously a lot of disappointed competitors who would love to get out there and strut their stuff, haven't had the chance. So locally, obviously we affect the local economy quite drastically, and without it going ahead, that economic hit to the local community is difficult to take. So eventually, a lot of disappointment, but in most cases, a lot of acceptance.
I want to, well, let me put it this way. We will pick up on the economic impact of the cancellation of these two events in just a second, but I want to bring Susie Hoda back in here just to talk about this. These are, I mean, the CNE is a massive event. The Fergus event is smaller, but still a significant number of people expected to attend, 20,000+ people. Do we need, in your view, in terms of infectious disease watch out, do we need to take a different approach to these big events, which have the potential to be super spreader events, versus smaller cultural events in smaller places that would attract smaller numbers? Do you think some of them could still go forward this summer?
Absolutely. I mean, size does matter in this situation. When you think about the number of contacts you could possibly have in a mass gathering where there can be 1 million people assembling from different parts of not just the country, but the world. Some of these are internationally renowned. That's a very different situation from a small local festival or market or what have you, where you can actually have better control over what people are doing and be able to design it in a way that's a little bit safer, to keep physical distancing in place, to ensure masking's in place, to ensure it's set up in a way that actually allows for the flow of people so that you can enjoy yourself but still keep with some of the public health measures. So I think everything about this pandemic and how we consider reopening should be about gradual increments of change and keeping in mind, safety as it pertains to what the situation is in the month that we're in and what's happening epidemiologically.
Let me do a follow-up on that, Susie, because obviously if you're running the Canadian National Exhibition and 200,000 people show up in one day, you're not going to be taking people's phone numbers and handing out, well, maybe you could hand out wipes to everybody who comes in, but some of the contact tracing measures would be difficult to do. Could you do that kind of thing with a smaller event?
It's possible. Again, contact tracing would be less concerning if there was an issue. I mean, you can contemplate how there are different additional measures that could be put into place, like, testing, rapid testing, ensuring that people are vaccinated. But all of these are difficult to implement. They have their own sort of ethical and, fairness challenges that are associated with them. And, I think it takes another layer of planning to do that kind of additional prevention measures. It's not something that we're used to doing with these festivals. So, I think that anything can be done with additional planning and with the timing, but the question is it worth going that route, and just how much will it help with the contact tracing and what we need to do at that particular time?
Well, events all over the province of Ontario not only obviously create memories and their wonderful traditions, not to be too crass about it, they sure help the bottom line of the province of Ontario as well. And I'm going to ask Tony Burke, who's directing today, to bring up these numbers, because how important are festivals and events to the province of Ontario? Well, they only contribute about $2.3 billion to the regional economy. They support more than 52,000 full-time jobs, and they generate more than $1 billion in taxes every year, in a normal year, of course. All right, Daryl, back to you. How much revenue in a typical year would the Canadian National Exhibition bring into the coffers of the capital city of this province?
Well, the economic impact to Toronto is around 93 million. To the province, it's around 128 million. The earned revenue that we actually take in at the fair itself would be in the range of 35 to 36 million for the 18 days.
And we know that some people, under some circumstances, are still able. I was talking to Ellis Jacob, the head of Cineplex, the other day, who said even though all the movie theaters are closed across the country, they've figured out a way to still realize some revenue through rentals and so on. Is there any way for the X to make any money at all if the Princess Gates are closed?
Well, we're in a little bit of a different position than, let's say, the Calgary Stampede or the PNE. We don't own the grounds, and that's often a misconception. People think when they say the CNE that we have control of the facilities. We actually rent from the city, so there's no capacity for us, for example, to move the data to the CNE and still have access to the facilities that we need. It's 192 acres, multiple buildings, and we pay a substantial amount of money to use those facilities. So it's a real challenge if there's any change in terms of the dates or the arrangement between the city exhibition place and ourselves.
So with no 20-day fair this year, your revenue is essentially nothing?
We looked at a 96% drop in our revenue last year. We cut costs by 86%, but we have depleted. Going into 2020, we had about $7 million in our coffers. $1.5 million of that was actually prepayments from vendors and concessionaires for the next fair. So we had $5 million that we would use to sort of pre-fund the planning of the next event. And then as we're getting closer to the event, we start to accumulate revenue from vendors, concessionaires, and then of course ticketing and parking as we get into the event itself. All of that's lost. So we completely depleted our $5.5 million. It costs us just to run our association $5.5 million a year. So that was gone in year one. We negotiated loans with our bank, Scotiabank. So we're living on borrowed money now, but under the terms of that loan, we would have to repay by September of this year. So basically, we are completely out of funds and looking for a way to survive to next year.
Is the future of the X in doubt?
Absolutely, unless the government, various levels step in. Now, the mayor has voiced strong support, and one doesn't reasonably expect that the city would be handing out cash given its own circumstances in dealing with COVID. But what the city can do is we pay, for example, a little over $4 million for use of the 192 acres during that 18-day period. We also lease 3 buildings on site, so there can be arrangements there that the city can help with, and they've agreed to help in that regard. But we need about $11 million to really get us to next year, and we've been talking with the federal government and provincial government really since the onset of the first wave, and trying to get support, and are still looking for that. Right now, the commitment we usually receive is $5,000 from the provincial government through AMAFRA, the Ministry of Agriculture, and that's it. We earn our own keep usually.
You get $5,000 a year from the province of Ontario.
That's it. Yeah. And when you compare it to, for example, what Minister MacLeod calls the Big 8 cultural institutions, and I'm in no way suggesting that they shouldn't be receiving funding, but like ROM, AGO, and the like, they receive in aggregate over almost $102 million in regular funding, and they've received $27 million in COVID relief funding already. But nothing so far in terms of, there's been a small business relief of about $20,000 that came from the province. But we've obviously taken advantage of the wage subsidy program federally and the rent subsidy program, but we need targeted assistance.
David, the Highland Games, how important to the local economy are they?
Well, different scale to Dowell, obviously. We contribute about $4 million to the local tourist economy each year. On top of that, we involve a lot of local community groups and businesses to set up the festival. So between $3.5 and $4.5 million of effect to the local economy.
And is the future of the Games in any doubt as a result of having to shut them down this year?
No, we ran into some really hard times back in about a decade ago, and we worked very hard to ensure that should we have a problem, we could ride it. Unlike Dowell, we've been very lucky. The governments have come forward to a lot of our smaller festivals and subsidized to some degree. We had what we call our rain fund. We figure that about every 4 to 4.5 years we get rained out, so we better have some money in the bank to look after it. So all in all, we will weather this. Our bank account will be way down, but we feel that we can afford to put things on next year, and hopefully we'll get the revenue coming. Our revenue comes from 3 sources, obviously, mainly from ticket sales. We get some government grants, and we have a lot of very loyal local sponsors that sponsor us each year, either with monetary donations or in-kind help with setting up the festival. So we're not in danger. I know a lot of the other festivals, local Scottish festivals, are, as a result of not being as large or as well funded as we are this year, but we're looking good.
Susie Hoda, we saw the other day that the province of Ontario has now set in motion what the 3 stages are for the reopening of the province and certain benchmarks that have to be hit in order for those stages to kick in. And I guess I would sort of put the same thing to you. It's obviously too late for these 2 events, but for other events looking at, we have to be under X number of positive cases. We have to have X% of the population with at least 1 vaccine. We need at least X% of the population with 2 shots. Can you give some advice to everybody watching this right now who may want to know if their festival can go forward, what targets you think need to be hit before they can?
You know, that's a really difficult thing to do, to actually pin down numbers that are going to be across the board, kind of the thresholds that we use. And that's why there's been such a struggle to even get to that point now, because the other thing that you have to keep in mind is, the rate of increase of cases varies according to what variants start to take over and what their transmissibility potential is. So, I think that we need to see stability in the numbers, not just a decrease in the numbers and hitting, a threshold, but stability, that we've kind of bottomed out at that number, at least for a short period of time. I do think it's really important to think not just about 1st dose coverage, but also 2nd dose coverage with these vaccines, which really does give you better protection, more reliable protection for a longer period of time. And I'd like to see younger age groups also vaccinated, not just looking at, percent coverage of adults. So, there are many things to think about that have to do with, those same thresholds that we've heard about with the reopening plan. Trying to pin down the numbers is a bit of a difficult task, as I've mentioned, for all those reasons.
No, I appreciate that. But, for example, people may remember a year ago, we were down to basically 200 positive test cases a day. We're a long way from that right now. I think last week's rolling average was somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500. So when you say we need stability, in roughly what neighborhood?
Just looking at less than 1,000 cases per day in the province to me still seems very high. I think we need to be aiming somewhere in the hundreds. Below 500 cases a day, I would say would be very positive in terms of thinking about what we can open up incrementally, in terms of festivals, gatherings, things like that. But, with every change, we've got to give it time as well to see that it's not going to have a big impact on what the overall cases are doing. And to me, an important indicator too that we haven't really talked about is what's happening in the healthcare system and how can we cope. We're going to have COVID-19 with us, longer term, perhaps forever. And if we can prevent the harms from infection, that's the most important indicator. If our healthcare system can cope with managing the incremental, requirements for care that COVID-19 has brought, that's important. Then we can get on with the rest of our lives.
Susie, I should ask you a question while I've got you here about something that has nothing to do with the province of Ontario, but it is going to be kind of the biggest event in the world taking place not too long from now, and that's the Summer Olympics. They're still scheduled to take place. In your view,
Yes.
does it make sense to go ahead with those games right now?
I feel very uneasy with that thought. That's truly bringing international populations together in large mass gatherings, with athletes and the Olympic Village where the athletes are staying, as well as a high risk kind of setting. It worries me quite a bit, especially as we're hearing about different variants emerging, and our ability to track some of those variants and know exactly what they're doing and what impact they have on people who get infected with them is still really quite limited, especially in different parts of the world. So, I'm not in agreement with that decision. Of course, it's not my decision. There are many other factors to consider beyond the epidemiology and what those risks are, but it does worry me quite a bit.
Daryl, let me give the last word to you, and that is, I presume at some point, now that this year is a write-off, you have to start thinking about next summer. At what point do you do that, and at what point do you think, here's what we need to get it going?
Well, I think people underappreciate the level of effort it takes to put on as diverse a show as the CNE. We work year round on planning, and in fact, even when we've planned a given CNE, there's some things we're looking at for the next year. So we would be looking at what is possible and how we could negotiate contracts from now going forward for the next season. Of course, the real dilemma for us is how do we do that when we've had to lay off the bulk of our staff? We're working with a skeleton crew now and still trying to search for that financing to get us to where we can go. But we have a significant international component. Speaking of people coming from other countries, we have an international stage of the 6 or 7 stages we usually put on. That takes a great deal of pre-planning to get people in the door. And of course, we also have an international pavilion where we bring in vendors from overseas. So there's lots of issues there because of the travel restrictions and what people can and cannot do, when they can apply for visas, and all of those kinds of constraints that we face as well. So there's a myriad of issues, and we're hoping that we get buy-in. If one does a cost-benefit analysis, we've talked about the economic impact. I think $11 million for a $128 million or more payoff, and 1,000 performers or entertainers being hired, over 700 businesses operating and earning revenue in the fair. It makes economic sense to continue this thing going and get the support we need to move forward.
That's Daryl Brown, Executive Director of the Canadian National Exhibition, making his case for the future of the CNE. David Radley from the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. Susie Hoda, University Health Network. It's great to have all three of you on TVO tonight. Stay safe, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
More than a decade ago, a decentralized group of international activist hackers, collectively known as Anonymous, made their way into global headlines for several high-profile hacks and pranks. One prominent member of that self-selecting band of disruptors is now Anonymous No More, with a documentary airing tonight on TVO. He is known as Commander X, and he's a human rights and information activist. He joins us tonight from Mexico City, Mexico. Also with us is Ian Thornton. He is a novelist and co-producer of that TVO original documentary called The Face of Anonymous. which has its world broadcast premiere right after this conversation. Ian is in Dunchurch, Ontario, just northeast of Parry Sound. And it's a pleasure to have both you gentlemen with us tonight here on TVO. I guess it makes start just before we start our conversation to show a short snippet of the trailer to whet the appetite of our viewers to the documentary that will come later. So let's do that now.
This document alleges that I am the notorious hacker activist known to the world as Commander X. I am Commander X.
Why did he say that?
You try to tell him to shut up. See how that works.
He told me that he was a cyber warlord.
One of the most notorious hackers online.
I've been called cyber terrorist.
His alias is Commander X. He says that Anonymous may very well be the most powerful organization on Earth.
I was Batman. I had powers.
Anonymous promised an army would bring unprecedented chaos.
The internet is coming for you. Get ready.
What are they after? What damage could they do?
Well, let's start with this. I know everyone calls you Commander X, but the name you were born with was Christopher. So let me ask you, what do you want me to call you?
Oh, I'm comfortable with X is good. I mean, the commander's kind of pretentious, right?
Okay,
but I mean, that's
X
what the movie's about a persona, first and foremost, and that persona has a name. So yeah, X is good.
X it is then. How did you become a hacktivist in the first place, X?
I think, I was drawn to the power of hacktivism. I was drawn to it as an activist. I think in the movie, Greg House summed it up. I was first and foremost, as he put it, a hippie activist. And I was picking up anything, throughout my life, throughout my career of trying to make a difference in this world, was picking up any tool really that was effective. Hacktivism, in my opinion, is probably one of the most effective tools of activism in modern times, maybe arguably in human history.
We should just say, for people who are hearing some noise in the background there, do you want to explain your circumstances right now?
Well, then if we're going to do that, we might as well show off. I mean, so yeah, I've got issues, right? And there's nowhere to put them. So I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can.
No need to apologize. We've had plenty of pets and kids and spouses and everything else on this program making cameos, so that's just consistent.
Well, let's be clear while we got a moment to do a plug for adoption. These are both Mexican street rescues, so don't buy an animal. Rescue your animals and rescue as many as you can. I got 2. That's about most I can handle. So
Gotcha.
They're like my
Thanks
kids. They're like my kids. Yeah.
Ian, let me move to you and ask what you saw as your role in trying to tell X's story.
Well, it started off very innocently, and I was walking down the street in Toronto in May 2016, pushing 2 children down the street in a little stroller, and there was a character on the steps of the Ukrainian church reading a very thick novel and had his cowboy hat out. He was panhandling. And I just recently had my first novel published, so I felt some kind of kindredship with him, I guess. And I dropped $2 into a cowboy hat, and little did I know that I was about to fall into the quicksand of cyber terrorism, cyber warlordship, spies, espionage, paranoia, and a journey that continues to this day. He looked up, he had a very interesting and intriguing countenance, and we hit it off straight away, and it was 6 weeks before he actually told me who he is, and it was the day after the Brexit vote. But I should backtrack. In the meantime, I had shared my novel with him, and he realized that I wasn't a Fed, and there was no chance or little chance of being renditioned from the church steps or from the park where he slept, and where he slept for much of 7 years whilst in Canada. So I guess he started to trust me, and then the day after the Brexit vote, he was very energized, and I asked him why. He said, well, this is good news for Julian. Julian who? Well, Assange. Okay, well, why is that so interesting to you? and he told me that he's communicated with him on a regular basis, and that he was himself a cyber warlord, and told me a long and expansive story, which naturally I doubted. And I thought, well, do we have a Fisher King type character here? Which I found just as intriguing and just as charming and just as beautiful as what could be the possible truth. But when he told me to go home and search in the New Yorker from September 2014, an article, a 25-page feature by David Kushner called "The Masked Avengers," that this was he, and so I did that. And as I read through it, there were physical descriptions, which sounded like it could be him, but there were no pictures. So I cross-referenced the name that was in the article, X's real name, Christopher Mark Doyon, and up popped a mugshot from when he was arrested in Santa Cruz, California. And that's when the penny dropped, and I get goosebumps when I tell that story to this day. The guy in the park, the guy sleeping under the tree in front of the old people's home, was the guy who helped to bring down Mubarak in Egypt and Ben Ali in Tunisia, and helped to propel Black Lives Matter into the consciousness.
Well, let's tell a bit more of that story if we can. I want to go back to X and tell a bit more of that story now, because X, you have lived on the streets for much of your life, and you have certainly over the course of your hacktivism career learned to be very mistrustful of a lot of people. So I wonder how you came to trust Ian to tell your story.
Well, Ian was not the first and not the last to have me reveal myself to them. I mean, a lot of people ask why. That's really like a more pertinent question. Why would I do something like that? Why would I take the risk? And the simple matter was, I'm not this huge, rich, famous activist. I needed help. I needed people to form a chain of social assistance to a dissident on the run from a repressive regime. And that effort was, ongoing all the time. It was a matter of judgment. It was a matter of sizing somebody up as quickly as you can, sizing up their character, sizing up whether or not, of course, they're involved with law enforcement or any kind of thing like that. And then just hoping for the best, then kind of throwing the dice and saying, well, I've done the best I can to check this person out, befriend this person, and then open myself up to them. Ian was unique in that most people that I do that with don't become this deep, lasting friendship. It is more of a case of, hey, I need you to do the right thing now. I need you to help me out.
Ian, for those who don't know, because we shouldn't assume everyone does, tell us what Anonymous is.
Oh, well, I really should defer to the master on the other side of the screen. But as far as I was concerned, it was something that in the small amounts that I'd witnessed it at that time was a body that was a very flat and decentralized body that was fighting for justice and seemed to be sticking up for the little guy. And I guess that's what appealed to the whole narrative. To me, I'm a novelist, a nosy novelist, so I sensed a wonderful story here. I should preface that by saying it was friendship first and friendship last, and friendship the thread that bound it all together. But in sensing that story, it was at the time when there was a sense that Trump might come to power. X certainly predicted in his prescience that Trump would come to power, and that Jared Kushner would be pivotal, and there'd be mischief and subterfuge. But I have two young children, and I guess the romantic in me wanted to sit in front of a post-apocalyptic hearth or fireplace one day and say to the kids, I did do something in the war. Not that I'm wishing a post-apocalyptic future, of course, but that I was doing something that made a sliver of a difference. And X and I disagree on some politics, but I think what we both agree on is is that there is a lack of justice in the world, and I guess that's what really appealed to me, and what I saw in Anonymous. I've learned a lot more about them since, and that it's a myriad of opinions and a myriad of individuals, and the most loosely knit community one could imagine.
Well, let's go back
originally
to
for
X
me it was justice.
Sure. Let's go back to X now, and just because to the extent I think X that a lot of people know of this organization, they certainly know about the Guy Fawkes masks that everybody has taken to wearing, and that became really the signature calling card of this organization, such as it is over the years. There you go.
You mean this one?
Do you want to give us the short story on how the mask became the identity of Anonymous?
It was convenient at the time when Anonymous, for the early part of its history, was a purely cyber movement. The idea of Anons even being in the streets had never been even conceived of, and then that changed. In maybe 2008, 2009. When Anons began to take to the streets. And of course, now you can look at a video from any protests that we all know in media are going on at this very moment: Colombia, Palestine, Myanmar. And I guarantee you, if you look at shots today, right now, this very moment, live shots from any of those street protests, if you look long enough, you'll see somebody wearing one of those masks. So it really grew from something, but it was a matter of necessity to cover our faces when we did hit the streets. And the Guy Fawkes mask, V for Vendetta, had just come out as a movie. It was a mask where you could call a costume shop in almost any major city in America at that time and get it. It could have just as well been some other stupid, iconic sort of movie-based mask. So
right.
I think a matter of coincidence, it was just really neat. It was the one really neat coincidence, I guess, or whatever the synchronicity is, that the V for Vendetta movie does tend to line up with the way that scene at the very end when all the Anons, people in masks, sort of converge on Trafalgar Square. That is very much the way Anonymous sees itself. So
now let me ask you about one of the jobs that you were involved in, the hacking of the government in Santa Cruz County, the website. Maybe you could explain for people why you felt it was important to do that.
Well, it's still very important to fight the very same cause. It's been going on for 30 years now. I've used various names for it. You can call it class warfare. You can call it a class pogrom. I think it's a war of class extinction, really, in Santa Cruz, where a very oligarchic elite group of people, we later called them and Occupy the 1%, have really taken over the city. They don't want to see any bohemian people. They don't want to see any street people. They don't want to see any tents. They don't want to see anybody laying around. It's really a battle that's 30 years old. First of all, it was already old when I got involved with it. But when I became visceral for me, when I began to sleep out on the courthouse steps with these people, fighting just basic sleeping bans and bedding bans and tent bans, now that Keith McHenry, founder of Food Not Bombs, is there now, still organizing the tent encampments, defending them in courts and in the streets with transgressive action. And so this is a thing that is really just a cause and this is happening all over the country. Let me tell you something. I live in Mexico. They don't bulldoze homeless camps down here, regardless of what you think of this country. So there's a problem, and it's going on in cities all across America. It always has been. Santa Cruz just happened to be my home. It happened to be a place where I encountered it. And what I did in the end with organizing the DDoS protest against the Santa Cruz County website was simply picking up another tool that just happened to be in my tool belt. I happened to be involved with Anonymous. It wasn't a big thing back then. It wasn't this big deal back when that happened, to be an anon or to sit in coffee houses and peck away at the world under the guise of a mask. So I was just, in my mind, it wasn't that big of a deal, really. I was picking up another tool of simple protest, a sit-in, a virtual sit-in, a cyber sit-in of the county website on behalf of people that I was living with these people by that point. I was experiencing their agony and their pain, and it was visceral for me. So
Now,
I
X,
was actually.
you've pointed out that you're in Mexico right now, and maybe we should use this moment to explain to people why you are in fact there, as opposed to in the United States anymore. What's the story there?
Well, that's my green card, guys. On there, I have, under the Immigration Act, the status of humanitarian refugee. It says so on the card. But and that's what covers political asylum here in Mexico. I've been granted political asylum. In fact, it was granted to me instantly upon my surrender in the movie. You can actually see me walking into the INM. I was very nervous. I mean, they had every legal right to arrest me at that point, but we had done a pressure campaign, anonymous, and my friends had pressured the Mexican government for several weeks to do the right thing. When I did surrender, they knew I was coming exactly when, and we walked in with a movie crew, which I suppose didn't help the respect level that I got from that point. But I surrendered. I was granted political asylum. You can go on Wikipedia and type in list of people who have received political asylum. I was quite proud for a while. That list began with Karl Marx and ended with me in Mexico, with Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia, a close second, both of those being from Mexico. Now there's a kid from the UK, from Hong Kong, who fled to the UK, and he's now last on that list. And also, I'd like to point out to Canadian viewers, I am the first U.S. citizen in history to successfully claim political asylum in Mexico, period. I mean, that's sort of significant aside from hacktivism. So.
And are you still doing hacktivism there?
No, those days are over. I do media. I have a weekly video show, a live stream show that I do. X Speaks, The World Through Sunglasses. You can pretty easily find that. I guess they're going to put out just for this interview my Twitter. That's a great place to start. And I do Twitter, and that's about it, really. I mean, I have to be a good guest. There are constraints. There are, things that I have to behave now, and there are things that are to be expected of me as a good guest in this country. And I want to keep this political asylum. I need the safety. I am truly fleeing a repressive regime. And anybody who doesn't believe that has had their head in the sand and their eyes closed for the last 4 years of the last regime. So,
well, can I ask you, X, do you have a home to live in?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm in a gated community. I'm in a compound, first of all. You can see behind me. That's why my house is able to be made completely almost out of glass. Everything you see around me, I'm in kind of a big octagon part of the house where my office is. And, I have a wonderful yard. Both my doggies have a great yard around, and we're in a walled compound. And then all of these compounds, all of my neighbors are in similar compounds, and we're in a gated community. Thankfully, I'm very close to the front gate, so I don't have to walk very far. And there's always a security guard out there at the front gate to control entry. So,
well, let me ask you, on the other hand, if there have been any repercussions, political or otherwise, to you, Ian, for either telling the story or helping X along the way.
No, there hasn't. And I, as I explained, when I first knew him, he was a friend in the park. He was a homeless man, and then when he revealed himself to me, I saw a very prominent lawyer in Toronto, and explained the situation to him, and that the next step would likely be a journalistic one, and that's when I took the project to first of all to Vice, and they were not a good fit. They didn't respect that a man's life was on the line. And I have a background in international television, so I made a couple of calls, and within a couple of weeks I had Werner Herzog on board to direct, and then when we lost Werner, he went off to Moscow to make the Gorbachev film, and it has to be said that there was a prominent SVOD streamer who turned this down with Werner Herzog on board, and didn't have the courage to do it, but TVO did. And that should be recognized as well. So thank you to TVO. So it was during that time that I realized I had journalistic cover, and I was telling a story. He hadn't committed a crime in Canada as far as I was concerned, and that was key. Then we proceeded with the film, and I think that's all justified by the fact that Mexico have now done what they have done. But sure, it was a strange and sometimes worrying time, but I got good advice.
Gotcha. X, I wonder whether you have any persisting relationship with Anonymous at this stage.
Well, I have never, first of all, had so many people who today want to make a living off of their former association with Anonymous. I've never disavowed my association with Anonymous. I am still an integral part of Anonymous is in my heart, and I'm still part of Anonymous every day. I do the best I can on Twitter and with my live show and my archive shows on YouTube to shine light on all the good work that my brothers and sisters are still doing out there who are wearing the mask. Am I going out in the streets wearing a mask? Am I going online and doing cyber protests? No, but I am using this 15 minutes of fame to try to shine as much light on the work of my brother and sister Anons out there. And I still consider myself fully a part of the movement. I'm simply constricted by, like I said, simple courtesy of being in another country and being liable to that hospitality and that protection. So.
And does it bother you that you yourself are really not anonymous anymore?
Well, yeah, but that's not my fault. That was never my intention. And the anonymity that the FBI stripped me from when they arrested me in Mountain View, and I held the press conference that is in the trailer where, you know, I proclaimed that I am in fact Commander X, is because they had accused me of being so in the indictment, and that I felt was necessary for other reasons. But when I did that and proclaimed myself, it was they had stripped me of an anonymity that was used not to hide any kind of what I considered criminal activity in the United States of America or the West. It was to protect me from, we already had by then Iranian death squads after me, for instance, who had threatened me and put fatwas out on me because of our work in the Green Revolution in Iran. By then we were literally networking all over the world, and being a persona in that made me a target. My anonymity as a protester online allowed me to confront these dictatorial regimes and these powers that be and be safe and protected. And what the FBI did, my government should have been protecting me for the good work I was doing at that point. And instead they stripped me and left me naked to the winds of my identity. And from there, I did what I had to do after that. But it was not my choice to become unmasked. I would still be masked if I had my way to this day. So.
I appreciate that, X. It does raise the question, though, of whether someday you actually hope to return to U.S. soil. What do you think?
I have offered to do so on a number of occasions. I have some knowledge that I think the whole Western world would enjoy being revealed to them, and it has to do with tangential to this interview, elections and things like that. I have made a standing offer that I will testify to Congress and debrief the President of the United States personally on certain things that I feel comfortable revealing to them. In exchange for immunity of my testimony, I would have to admit to certain crimes. In addition, I need to return to U.S. soil to do that, and I want a full pardon from all. From everything, and I would return home under those conditions. I think it would be good for America. I think there's no reason for intellectuals and authors and protesters like myself to have to flee the United States. The United States is supposed to be the bastion of freedom. It's supposed to be a place where we're all free to exercise ideas, even if they're transgressive and uncomfortable ideas. We're supposed to be able to do that. I'll come home. I'll call a truce on this great war that seems to have evolved between the U.S. and Anonymous, and I'll even debrief the American public and Congress on some things that I think are, good information for the public to understand about what's going on in cyberspace today, and especially how that relates to your elections. So it's a standing offer. Sure, I would go home. I think that's ever going to happen? To be honest with you, I will tell you the truth. I think the last hope for something crazy and out of the box like that happening left when Donald Trump left on Inauguration Day. I don't think that the Democratic regime, Obama locked up more whistleblowers, more hacktivists, and combined than all other presidents combined before him. That's a fact. That's a numerical fact. That he locked up more of us than all presidents before him combined. The Democrats are not our friends. They never have been. I'm not saying that the Republicans are necessarily the greatest people to have in power, but this is not a political issue from my standpoint. This is, how do I keep myself and my people free? How do I keep other Anons out of harm's way? How do I educate them on what is the best way forward when the jackbooted thugs kick in your door and take your computer and haul you in your pajamas in the middle of the night because you got online and did some kind of protest? So that my ideas of politics, I think, are different than other people's, because I'm facing the direct point of the spear of American law enforcement and intelligence as far as, what their ideas are about what's acceptable political discourse.
Well, X and Ian, I want to thank both of you for coming onto our program tonight. And I say we should probably cut off our conversation now, because I don't think we want to delay having our viewers watch the real thing now. So we're grateful for your participation in this program. And we want to remind everybody that right after this program, immediately thereafter, you can catch the documentary, The Face of Anonymous, right here on TVO, or you can watch it anytime you like on our website, tvo.org/documentaries. Also, you can hear the director of the documentary, Gary Lang, in conversation with Colin Ellis on TVO's On Docs podcast, and that's also available on our website, tvo.org. And that is the agenda for Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. Could a ransomware attack, such as the one that hit a pipeline in the U.S. this month, happen here? We're looking at that tomorrow. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.